Okay, good morning everyone. We'll call this meeting to order. I'll ask if there's any disclosure of pecuniary interest. Councillor Foster?
Yes, Your Worship, on item 10.7, the appointment of, to the board of WDSI, I have a business relationship with one of the people, so I'll be stepping back from that. Also, there's an item in the in-camera that if it goes to be discussed, I'll have to step back at that point, and I'll identify it in camera if we go.
Okay, thank you. If there's nothing else, if you find throughout the meeting you do, please declare it at that time. I will note we will be removing 5.2 in the closed session as it is no longer required, so you can strike that from your agenda. If I can have a mover and seconder for the regular meeting of council minutes, July 28th, Councillor Watson and Councillor Foster. Resolved that the minutes of the regular meeting of council held July 28th, 2020 are hereby adopted as circulated. All those in favor? And that is carried unanimously. Mover and seconder for the special meeting of council minutes August 13th, Councillor Wells and Councillor Foster. Resolved that the minutes of the special meeting of council held August 13th, 2020 are hereby adopted as circulated. All those in favor? That is carried unanimously. We do have a few items in the closed session. I will ask if there's any need to go in closed session. If not, we'll carry on with the agenda. Okay, so if there's no need, then we will go to the 5.3. If I could have a mover and seconder for that, please. Deputy Mayor Bray and Councillor Wells. Resolved that council receive the external board meeting minutes provided in closed session for information. All those in favor? And that is carried unanimously. And we are splitting 5.4. If I could have a mover and seconder for the meeting minutes of July 28, 2020 closed session minutes. And I will note that Councillor Watson will not be voting on this one as he was not at the meeting. I could have a mover and seconder. Councillor Belanger and Councillor Wells. Be it resolved that council received the following closed session reports as circulated and approves all actions contained therein. Regular meeting of council, July 28th, 2020, closed session minutes. All those in favor? And that is carried unanimously. We'll welcome Councillor Watson back to the table, and if I can have a mover and seconder for the August 13th. Councillor Watson and Deputy Mayor Bray. Resolved that council received the following closed session reports as circulated and approves all actions contained therein. Special meeting of council, August 13th, 2020, closed session minutes. All those in favor? And that is carried unanimously. Moving on to deputations, presentations, petitions, and public meetings. We do have a presentation today from our CIO, Keith McAllister, CEO of Wasaga Distribution, if you wanted to join us at the table. Or is Trent's going to lead it. Trent's going to lead, so we also have Trent Gowan. I'll just ask our CIO, George Vademont-Kerr, to speak first, if he would.
Thank you, Worship. Well, Chair Gow is taking his seat, as well as CEO McAllister. I just wanted to indicate to members of council that this is the first AGM that council is convening of Geosands and its affiliates. Normally this would be held in June as part, or May, as part of the presentation of the audit of financial statements, but due to COVID and whatnot, we weren't able to get everything organized for June, but I'm pleased to say that the Geosands chair and the auditor and the CEO are here today to present their annual general meeting report and answer any questions that members of council may have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, and I'll pass it over to you, Trent.
Thank you very much, and thank you for hosting us today. It's nice to see so many happy faces first thing in the morning. This is early for me.
Let's keep them happy, okay, Trent?
We are following a meeting format because this is for Geosands, Wasaga Distribution, and Wasaga Resources Services, Inc. is an annual general meeting. So I would like to call the meeting to order. Now, typically the next thing, I do that. The next thing would be the consideration of minutes, but since this is the first of such meetings with council, there are no minutes. So there will be next year, the chair at that time will do that. So I'd now like to start the presentation, and Keith, could you turn to the first slide? With me, by the way, and I apologize, is Keith McAllister, the CEO of all three companies, and Jay Anstey, who is with Baker Tilly, who is our auditor. And you've seen Jay other years, so I'm the rookie in this. Thank you. Now, I wonder, you all, council members have all seen the list of items on the agenda. I don't propose to read it, but I wonder, do people who are watching at home, can they see that? Yes. Okay, so I'll just pass right along then, please. Thank you. The first item on the agenda is just to talk about changes to the organization. And it was a significant year. It was the first year of having Keith McAllister as CEO. He is now midway through a 3-year contract with us. And we had, it says here, 6 new board members. We actually had 7 board members. I was one of those. And subsequently, Bruce Young, who was associated for like 17 years, has stepped away. I'm now chair until such time, and I believe on your agenda later today, you're appointing 2 new directors of Geosands and 1 of WRSI, and that new board then can determine who their chair will be. But it's my honor to do that today. Thank you. I don't think there's anything else in that slide, other than to say in passing that it was also a very eventful year with COVID and other things, as we'll get to. One of the important things we did was look at intercompany financing arrangements, but I guess it was something that had been offside by some definition for a long time, and it had some cost to us. Keith, could you explain what the nature of that was and why it's of value to the shareholder, which is, in this case, the town of Wasaga Beach is our sole shareholder?
Great, thank you, Trent. So the arrangements you have with the affiliate relationship code allows for the cost to be moved from one company to the other at a fully burdened cost. What we did is we looked at that to make sure that the application of those costs were being done appropriately to meet the requirements in the affiliate relationship code as deemed by our regulator, the Ontario Energy Board. We made some changes to that agreement between the companies, and ultimately what it would do, it would move more money into our capital program because the allocation of overheads wasn't being appropriately allocated there. Ultimately what that does, it increases our rate base, the value of the company itself, and over time that rate base will continue to grow, and that means that the shareholder has a company that's worth more than it is today. So it always has grown, but it will grow at a faster rate by the appropriate allocation of our costs.
Thank you. The next slide in our agenda, unlocking external borrowing capabilities. This is something that's been talked with council recently. Keith, do you want to address this as well, please?
Sure. As we go forward, we try to grow our companies, whether it be in the distribution company or in the services company. One of the things we need is access to the available capital that we have, or the dollars that we have within the company. So what we did is the first step was to unlock financing arrangements for the distribution company, who we're looking at a larger capital program in the coming years. So the first step was to go out and find a vendor or a lender that will loan us money under various conditions, and we went out through a tendering process. We explored a number of different financial institutions, and we ultimately selected one that we work with over the next 3 years until 2024. And what they've agreed to do is loan us up to $13 million as long as we maintain certain financial performances within the company. So that agreement's in place, and then as we borrow money for our capital programs, we won't be going back each time. The conditions that we have are listed in the agreement, but we'll go back and we'll borrow money as we need and as approved by the board and the shareholder if need be. So we did that for the distribution company, and we'll probably be doing the same thing for the services company in the coming year.
Thank you, Keith. And one thing for sure is that it's important that the shareholder approve all of those particular expenditures that have been, or advances, if you want to use that word, that have been identified. So thank you. Looking at asset protection, it's a vague term, but in fact can mean all sorts of things like transformers and telephone poles. Again, Keith, I wonder if you could talk to this. I think we found that over the last year or so that, as you know, as the new team took place, that the state of the poles, if you want to call it, the state of some of these assets was not really what it should be. And it's not that it's an emergency, but it's something that has to be managed.
Thanks, Trent. So long-term planning is critical for the organization. And what we did is we started putting a plan together, a multi-year functional plan on our asset replacements. And we have a fair number of assets that are aged and that we have to put some attention to. Over the last number of years, the community has grown significantly, and the dollars that we had in our budget often went to those subdivisions and those developments to grow the community. And it took the money away from the actual implementation of replacing our existing infrastructure. Excuse me. In the coming years, and probably 10 years from now, we'll be starting and undertaking the replacement of some of our underground systems. That becomes extremely expensive, and we'll be diverting capital funds from overhead to underground replacements. So we want to make sure that our overhead system is in good shape when that comes. So we're looking at the 10, 15, even 20-year window to make sure that what we're doing now allows us to do what we need to do in the future. If you look at, I'll move the second slide, but in a second, in 2019 we did 437 new residential lots. That's new customers that came on. We're expecting this year to be similar. Replacements of approximately 100 of the aged poles that had been deemed to have failed, and we replaced 35 distribution transformers. But what we do have...
Can I ask you a question that people might find interesting? What's one pole worth? How much is a telephone post worth?
Oh, I think it really depends. I mean, we have poles that range from 35 feet, which just has secondary on them, to up to 70 feet that could have multiple high voltage circuits on. The pole itself ranges anywhere from about $1,400 to $2,200, $2,300 for the pole, but it's actually the installation that's expensive. New construction is quite easy because you're not working around energized conductors, but if you're putting a 70-foot pole into a line that's got 3 high voltage circuits and secondary circuits and Bell and Rogers on it, that's a fair bit more, and you could run anywhere from $7,000 to $9,000 for the installation of one pole.
Thank you. The next page, or are you finished?
Well, the next page quickly talks about the long-term requirement for assets to make sure that we can continue to deliver. It's noted in here that 56% of our poles are past financial useful life. Financial useful life is calculated based on a number of studies through lots of communities around that says an average pole will last X number of years and we depreciate it. We have over half our poles past that point. The good news is with the sand that we have in Wasaga Beach, we have good drainage and our poles tend to last a little bit longer. So it is a concern and we're moving forward, as well as our main substations are getting old and we're doing some replacements and upgrades on those.
Okay. Thank you very much. I guess the next item is system performance. We all remember that major outing we had when a truck took out a pole. It just happened to be a transformer that was a very critical one and wouldn't ordinarily take that long. But has that impacted what you would look as our comparator with respect to system performance?
Sure, Trent. There's two metrics we look at. One is a duration index and the other one is a frequency index. And in the chart you have in front of you, and this we posted on our website for people to look at afterwards, Wasaga Beach is doing, quite well. We're not the best in the province, and we're certainly not the worst in the province. There's two components to it. There's the supply, how often the supply is out to us, where it's not part of our system. And the other part that we look at is what we call a loss of supply adjusted. And that's really the performance of our system. The customers experience the total outage. So whether it's within our system or our supplier to us. And you can see in the chart there's a big difference, that over half the time that we're out and more than half the time in terms of frequency we're out is due to a loss of supply from our supplier. So I look at from a performance of our system, the adjusted one, but the customer truly experiences the total outages. Last year, in terms of the duration, we had one main incident where we had a car hit a pole. It took out a significant portion of our system, and we had a lot of actually failures of meters on customers' walls, and we were out for an extended period of time. So last year was a poor year from a duration perspective, but we did see an improved performance.
Thank you very much. Turning to the next slide, and addresses something, a rate comparison that we all are, I think, very proud of, and it was a key element actually in the discussion over the last few years in terms of retaining the ownership of WDI as it was characterized. We have a very excellent rating relative to other utilities in terms of distribution. You can see on the slide that we're third best in the province last year, and we will be again. Is there any reason, Keith, why that in particular? I mean, is it just efficient management, outstanding staff, circumstances?
Well, I mean, I certainly have to congratulate all the staff at Wasaga Distribution for the hard work that they do. I mean, they do a lot and with the limited staff that we do have. I think part of it's the capitalization policies that we've had before. The rates are tied, the rates customers paid are tied to our rate base. Our rate base is quite low. It's one of the lowest in the province on a per customer basis, and that's because we've expensed most of our costs versus capitalizing them over time. I mean, that would change, but it would change very slowly. And I can imagine for the next 5 years anyways or longer, we'll continue to be in the very, very bottom and the most inexpensive utilities in the province. When you look at your distribution bill, on it there's a delivery line. The delivery line includes the costs that we have, but it also includes other costs from our supplier. So when you look at that number, it's not just the money going to us. Then, of course, there's transmission costs and there's the cost of power, and those are pass-through costs that we collect on behalf of the transmitter and the generators. So a very small portion, around 20% of the bill, actually is the cost to keep the distribution company going in Wasaga Beach.
Thank you very much. Turning to the next item, we both have been, obviously everyone has been affected by COVID-19, and I know that Geosands and the three companies have worked closely with the town, and we thank the town management for that. There are some particular impacts of COVID and arrangements made by the province in terms of concessionary rates and how long bills are left outstanding. Do you want to address the highlights, please?
Sure, thanks, Trent. Obviously, COVID affected every company. It came on quickly, and we had to make decisions on the go throughout the year. We had to attempt to close our front doors to our customers. They're back open now. We've taken precautions, as every business has, to allow our customers to come in and talk to us. We agreed in a lot of cases and worked with the government to do things like we not cut off power until the end of July to give people chances to make adjustments. We're offering flexible repayment plans if they can't pay their bills, and we're working with all our customers in those. We're delivering a COVID emergency assistance plan for residential customers, and just recently announced a new one for small businesses as well. So we're helping move those through and help our customers out wherever we can. We're working on a option for our customers to either go time of use, which is what we're used to other than through this COVID period, or a tiered rate billing structure. We're looking for having that in place for around November 1st. And that was one of the government's initiatives they asked us to do, and we're working with them to prepare for that. We also deferred our rates in May until November to give people a break on their bills. And as I mentioned, recently announced there's a COVID emergency assistance program for small businesses, and we're reaching out to those in town that might qualify.
Thank you very much. One next item before we get to the audited statements is the financial health and utility performance. There are a number of ratios that are listed in the presentation, and it's available on web as well. The presentation is. I would highlight the fact that we have a #1 rating in terms of efficiency assessment, and only 6 out of 63 utilities in Ontario have that. So that, again, with our rate comparison, says why I think this is a gem of an organization. The core of it is a gem. The other financial ratios there are excellent, and they lead into the audit, which is, I believe, excellent too. And at that, I would pass it over to Jay and Steve Blake-Tilly to do that, please.
Great. Thank you, Chair Gao. So I'm here to do my typical presentation, present the audited financial results, the reports of our audit findings, and the results on an adjusted accounting basis, which ultimately, with the accounting policies that are in effect, that's how the statements are consolidated. and are reported, and ultimately how the decisions are made on the amounts of money to flow into the town of Wasaga Beach from Geosands. I always like to start with the organizational structure, just to remind council and members of the public that the actual operations of these companies are in Wasaga Resources Services Inc. and Wasaga Distribution Inc., the results of which are then consolidated and reported in Geosands Inc., and that our audit does follow a similar process in that we audit the underlying companies first. We test the procedures in place to ensure that there's controls put in place by management. We test samples of transactions, not all transactions, but we test on various models based on higher risk areas and sampling, and then we verify the year-end balances as of December 31st, 2019. So that's our approach to the audit. Next slide. The actual audit results resulted in unqualified audit opinions for all three companies that we do perform audits on, and this means that the financial statements are prepared fairly and presented fairly in all material respects. The audit reports were presented to the committees of the boards in great detail by myself, and then ultimately presented to the board for approval, and this happened on April 23rd, 2020. Along with our audit results, there is a management letter that we issued, and this is where we would report on any control findings or control weaknesses. We did issue a no issues letter reporting that we didn't find any particular control issues that we wanted to report on. Part of the audit this year, we did look at with the new CEO position, there were some changes in the processes in terms of management reporting to the CEO, and then ultimately the CEO reporting to the new committee structure and the board of directors. And as part of this, we didn't find any particular issues to report on. Slide. In terms of financial results, I'll do a high level and again on what I think it's important for council to understand. Starting with revenue of approximately $21 million in 2019. This is made up of three main components of revenue. The first of that is sale of power, and this is the charges to customers of the town of Wasaga Beach that the utility companies purchase power from the generators and flow these charges through to the town of Wasaga Beach customers. So of that $15 million, there's an equal offsetting cost of $15 million, and the utility companies earn no profit on this company. They will always offset. So the bulk of revenue is actually just a flow through of the utility. The next important line is distribution services revenue of $4.37 million in 2019. And as you can see, this is fairly flat from 2018 at $4.34 million. And this is where the utilities do earn a return on investment. Along with this distribution service revenue being flat, I'm happy to report that costs generally remain flat for all operating costs, with the exception this year of the addition of the CEO. That was an additional cost that did result in some reduction in net income for the 2019 year. The third line that's important to understand is the construction revenue line, and this is within WRSI, the construction activities that they perform to services to developers and to some other third parties. Revenue of $980,000 in 2019 compared to $211,000 in 2018. While this appears to be a significant change, it's more on the accounting policies. There was a change in 2018 that resulted in revenue can't be recognized until power is flowing to a completed project. So at the end of 2018, there were several projects that were in progress, Georgia Meadows, I think it was Trillium Phase 3, that weren't completed, so those were recognized as revenue in 2019. What this does is increase revenue in 2019 compared to 18, where if you had recognized as the construction activities were complete, you would have seen more of a smooth net income revenue between year over year. So that brings us down to our net income of $879,000, which is down slightly from 2018, but overall fairly comparable year over year. Really the increase of some operating costs offset by the additional construction revenue brought in. On the consolidated balance sheet, three important line items to note. Always note the most significant balance on the balance sheet is property, plant, and equipment, and these are your poles and wires and the hydro infrastructure that the utilities do own. In 2019, there was $2.8 million of additions to property, plant, and equipment. $1 million of this was funded by developers, so as subdivisions are constructed by developers, they do incur their own costs, and then ultimately those assets are owned by the utilities. But the remaining $1.8 million was spent on their own assets by the utility company themselves. So profits are going to reinvest in their own infrastructure. The note payable to the town of Wasaga Beach, so that's the loan that the town has given to the utility companies for $3.5 million. That's been the same since the inception of these companies. And the town earns interest, it's about 3% for $135,000 of cash interest revenue that's paid from the utilities to the town, and that's been consistent each year. And then finally, shareholders' equity, and this is a function of the net income that I referred to in the previous slide, less any dividends paid. So the shareholders' equity has increased by $531,000, and that's that net income I referred to on the last slide, less a cash dividend of $366,000 that was paid out in December of 2019 based on the preliminary 2019 results. I believe that is all the highlights I do have as part of my presentation.
Thank you very much, Jay. That was great. That's a credit to you and to the council. Two other items quickly to address. One, and this is the strategic planning. We embarked on this last year, so in the year that we are considering, it was just passed. The strategic plan was just adopted this year. Keith, do you want to just highlight quickly? We hired a company called Strategy Corp and went through a comprehensive effort, and we have, I think, an outstanding plan with the involvement of council. Thank you very much. And 800 people of the town participated, which is incredible. I think the consultants were knocked out that there was so much active community participation.
Thanks, Trent. This was certainly a major undertaking for the company. It's a roadmap that will lead us through the next 3 to 5 years in the company. It gives us an idea of things that we need to do, where we need to go, and the steps we need to take to get there. It was a very long consultation process because we decided to go and do a broad-based consultation, which included, employees, executives, board members, shareholders, and our community, which is very important to us. All that information was compiled. And I'm pleased to say that our last board meeting last week, the strategic plan was approved, and we'll be delivering to council a copy of that in the coming weeks. We'll also be posting the results of that on our website for our customers to look at as well. We won't share it with everybody. It's about where our company is going, and a very important document that we're pleased to say that has been completed.
Thank you very much. So the last slide that we have, or the last element of our presentation, just to highlight the value that we believe that Geosands and the subsidiaries brings to the community. Do you want to just address the key things of that, Keith, particularly the dividend that was just delivered?
Sure. One of the things that we've been working on is looking at how to ensure we have value for our shareholders. In 2019, we declared a dividend of $366,000. In April, we had our audited financial statements, and we're going to be timing future dividends around the April financial audited statements. So last week, the board of directors declared a $390,000 dividend. It's based on the audited financial statements that came out in April. We'll pay a further $134,000 of interest, which we do at the end of the year, and that'll bring a total payment to the shareholder in 2020 of $524,000. So we'll be delivering a check to you in the coming week. Overall, when we look at the value of the company, it's done very well for the town of Wasaga Beach. We paid over $3 million in both interest and dividends for over $6 million, almost $6.5 million.
Each. Not together, each.
So each, but it's
$6 million.
$6 million total between dividends and interest since we incorporated in 2000. So that's doing quite well for our utility. We continue to maintain